Given America's present record-setting rate of violence, murder, division, and mayhem, maybe it's time to try another way. Maybe God's way. To join us for the Stand on the Word Bible reading plan, go to frc.org/Bible. All right, Russian forces have been making slow advances in Ukraine and have resorted to more brutal attacks, including a strike that destroyed a maternity hospital in one of the besieged towns. Earlier today, war correspondent Chuck Holden gave us an update on the situation from the ground in Kyiv.
Well, it may be the calm before the storm, Tony, but here in downtown Kyiv, it's been very quiet for the last couple of days. As a matter of fact, we haven't heard a lot of action in the way of air raid sirens or explosions, just a few, and those are off in the far distance. Where the majority of the fighting has been, at least around this city, has been in the northeast and in the northwest. Yesterday in the northeast, Russian forces pushed into Kyiv city limits for the first time. And over there in a place called Brovary, they actually really got wiped out. They had an entire tank regiment just wrecked by Ukrainian resistance fighters. And the Russians lost maybe up to 25 or 30 tanks in that engagement. So very, very difficult day for the Russians out there. On the northwest side in Irpin and Bucha, the Ukrainians were able to evacuate about 60,000 people over the last 2 days because they had made an agreement with the Russians for them to stop shooting between 9 a.m. and 9 p.m. But yesterday, about 3 p.m., the Russians started up again and killed 2 people and wounded several more who were all in the process of trying to escape. Now, the Russians have not made much progress in the last week in encircling Kyiv or in taking more territory, and so they've resorted to more brutal attacks, just bombing mostly with large unguided munitions. So we're talking up to 2,000-pound bombs like the one that they dropped on the hospital in Mariupol, the children's hospital, just yesterday. 3 people were killed, including 1 child, and 17 people were injured, they say, in that bombing attack. But it absolutely destroyed that maternity hospital and made a crater the size of a house. And again, those unguided munitions say something about the disposition of the Russian military. They are resorting to these dumb bombs, partially because of the delivery systems that they have to use to get them in here. They're not close enough to use artillery to Kyiv or to many cities, and they really have not taken any major metropolitan areas in this entire country, with the possible exception of the city of Kherson down in the south, although the Ukrainians say that city is still in play. But what it comes down to is that the Russians are stepping up the violence of their attacks while they're actually losing most engagements. And I think that shows a real tenacity on the part of the Ukrainian people. So back to you, Tony.
Well, joining me now to talk about the unfolding situation in Ukraine and how some in Congress are exploiting the crisis to advance their own anti-family agenda is Congressman Michael Burgess, who is a member of the House Rules Committee, the Budget Committee, and the Committee on Energy and Commerce. He represents the 26th Congressional District of the Lone Star State. Congressman, welcome back to the program.
Thanks for having me on, Tony. And actually, I should mention, for 30 years, I practiced at an OB hospital. That was my medical specialty. It's one of the happiest places on earth, and it's just the definition of terrorism to bomb a facility like that.
You're absolutely right, and I should have mentioned that because one of the topics we've talked about quite a bit is on the medical issues that are making their way through Congress. But you're on the Rules Committee, and I played a clip earlier of Nancy Pelosi talking about the sausage making, and this was a 2,700 plus page bill that was dropped on Congress with just a few hours to try to digest and read through what was in this bill. And of course, now we know there's a lot of bad stuff in this bill.
So that's right. We were kept up late 2 nights ago in the Rules Committee with the promise that the bill is going to come forward for our inspection. And basically it did with 15 minutes notice. At about 2 o'clock Eastern time 2 days ago, the Rules Committee passed out a rule that would allow the bill to be brought to the floor. Now, unfortunately for Nancy Pelosi, her side wasn't all on board with what they were doing. The only positive thing that I had seen in the entire process was some of the new coronavirus spending was going to be offset with unspent dollars that were in some of the previous coronavirus spending. So, okay, maybe that's a celebrate a small victory. But then the House Democrats apparently couldn't stomach that. And they required that provision be stripped from the bill. House was delayed about another 24 hours while Speaker Pelosi, the very definition of a lame duck speaker, had to corral her more raucous members to get them to come on board.
Now, Congressman, the bill was divided into two. It's kind of bifurcated. One dealt with the defense funding, which most of the Republicans supported. Some of the moderates or progressives did not. But then there was the domestic portion of it, which included a reauthorization of the Violence Against Women Act, which changed definitions. It includes the sexual identity and gender issues, as well as some other foreign funding that would advance this whole gender ideology. Was the motive behind dividing it trying to minimize the opposition to the bill so that they could pass out of the House?
Perhaps, but bear in mind, this should have been 12 separate bills that were marked up in the Appropriations Committee and then heard individually on the floor, where individual members would have a chance to offer their amendments as it came through the process. None of that happened. And here we are almost 6 months past the deadline, 6 months into the new fiscal year, and here's this spending bill. The best they can do is bring it up in two parts, one defense, one non-defense. Some wins for certainly for people who are pro-life in their orientation. The Hyde Amendment protections were kept in the base language, and I'm very I have to give a lot of credit to the Republicans on the Appropriations Committee for keeping the Hyde Amendment language intact through what was a pretty serious onslaught. But as you point out, the negatives far outweighed any positives. And the number, here's my limited experience, anytime you vote for a bill this size, whether it be the defense side or the social spending side, there are going to be things in there there's no way in the world that you would ever support. So the whole process was wrong. The bill was too big. It came to us too late. We should do better. And, Republicans talk about being in charge next time. This is one of those areas where really we need to bring it back to its original form, original intent, do better, let regular order proceed, and let members be heard. We are the representatives of the people that send us there. And if you shut out our voices, basically you're shutting out the people's voice.
Right. And it need to go back to, as you said, the appropriations process as it was designed to be. I mean, my observation, Congressman, is that the Democrats saw this as an opportunity when it came to this emergency funding for Ukraine to push all of this through at one time, knowing they didn't have the support for it to stand on its own.
That's correct. They saw the horse and harnessed it up, and let's see what we can pull through in the process.
Let me switch gears slightly to another issue that's at the forefront of Americans' mind. They're going to the gas pump. Gas prices going through the roof, historically high gas prices. The Energy and the House Energy and Commerce Committee held a hearing on electric vehicles amid this energy crisis, which the Biden administration is obviously blaming on Putin. What can you tell us about this? I mean, people want help right now. They don't want to be lectured about getting an electric car.
Yeah, and I apparently incurred the wrath of the Secretary of Department of Transportation for accusing him of a Marie Antoinette moment when he said, well, if gas prices are too high, just buy an electric car. Sure, Pete, that's going to be the answer to people's problems. But look, this is exactly why I think the Democrats are going to be in so much trouble politically next year, because they have put themselves on the path of this almost religious agenda at the altar of climate change at the expense of everything else. And that everything else happens to be ordinary, everyday Americans who are just trying to work for a living and feed their families and keep themselves safe. Those are the ones that have suffered in this exchange. And there's no amount of offshore wind to power electric vehicles in the future that is going to happen in the time frame that that the Democrats think that they can use. It's just not. It's not realistic that it's going to happen
No.
in such short order. It's going to cause massive disruption and massive discomfort for American families, and we should be on their side.
Right. And they need help now.
Yes.
They need help now. And these are policies, as you pointed out, these are things that could have been avoided had they made the right policy decisions 10, 12 months ago when they came into office. Congressman Burgess, always great to talk with you. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Tony.